Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable and let your breathing slow. If you enjoy peaceful anime stories like this one, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and leaving a comment to let me know which anime you'd like to hear next. Your support helps this channel continue creating calm, relaxing stories for rest and sleep. Now, let the day fade away and let the story begin. The Straw Hat Pirates arrived at the sea train station leading toward the world government's judicial island, Enies Lobby, after learning that Nico Robin had willingly surrendered herself to CP9 in order to protect the crew from destruction. Although Robin acted coldly and insisted she no longer wished to travel with them, Luffy refused to believe she truly wanted to abandon the friends who had finally accepted her after a lifetime of betrayal and loneliness. Before reaching Enies Lobby itself, the Straw Hats chased Robin aboard the dangerous sea train crossing the ocean toward the government stronghold. During the journey, Sanji secretly infiltrated parts of the train, while Frankie, Usopp, and the others fought against CP9 agents and government guards, attempting to stop them before they reached Robin. Meanwhile, Nico Robin remained trapped alongside Frankie under the custody of CP9, the world government's elite assassination unit led by Spondum. Robin quietly accepted her fate because she believed her existence only brought destruction to the people around her, especially after surviving 20 years as the sole survivor of Ohara and being hunted by the world government since childhood. Deep within Enies Lobby, Spondum prepared to deliver Robin to the gates of justice, where she would eventually disappear into the government's prisons forever. Obsessed with power and status, Spondum cared little about Robin herself, and instead focused on using her ability to read poneglyphs in order to gain control over the ancient weapon Pluton and increase his authority within the world government. As the Straw Hats finally stormed Enies Lobby itself, thousands of Marines and government soldiers attempted stopping their advance across the massive judicial island. However, Luffy charged recklessly forward through the government defenses while the rest of the crew fought their way deeper into Enies Lobby beside Frankie. Family members and Galley-La shipwrights who joined the rescue mission. The attack upon Enies Lobby quickly became one of the boldest acts in the world, because the Straw Hats openly invaded one of the world government's strongest strongholds solely to rescue one crewmate. Even CP9 initially struggled to understand why pirates would risk everything for Nico Robin when she herself seemed willing to disappear quietly without resistance. Eventually, Luffy and the Straw Hats reached the rooftop of Enies Lobby's courthouse, where Robin stood handcuffed beside CP9 while trying desperately to suppress her emotions and force herself to reject the crew. Believing the government would destroy the Straw Hats if she returned to them, Robin insisted she wanted to die and told them to leave her behind before it was too late. At that moment, Luffy ordered Sogeking to shoot down the world government's flag standing above Enies Lobby itself. Without hesitation, Usopp fired a blazing shot directly into the flag, setting it on fire before the shocked Marines and CP9 agents, while the Straw Hats openly declared war against the entire world government for Robin's sake. As the burning government flag collapsed behind them, Luffy screamed at Robin to finally tell them what she truly wanted instead of sacrificing herself alone once again. Overwhelmed by years of fear, loneliness, and pain, after spending her entire life believing she did not deserve happiness or companionship, Robin finally broke down crying and screamed the words that became one of the most emotional moments in the entire journey. "I want to live! Take me out to sea with you!" After Robin finally broke down crying and declared that she wanted to live, the emotional atmosphere across Enies Lobby changed completely, as the Straw Hats fully committed themselves to rescuing her, no matter how powerful the world government might be. For the first time in many years, Robin allowed herself to believe she truly deserved friendship, freedom, and a future alongside people who genuinely wanted her to stay alive. Meanwhile, Spondum became furious after the Straw Hats openly declared war against the world government by burning its flag directly above Enies Lobby itself. Obsessed with proving his authority and terrified of failure, Spondum ordered CP9 to eliminate the Straw Hats immediately, while preparing to transport Robin through the gates of justice before the rescue mission could succeed. At that moment, the full strength of CP9 finally stood against the Straw Hats. As the world government's elite assassination unit, CP9 members possessed terrifying combat abilities, including Rokushiki techniques that allowed them to move at superhuman speeds, strike with overwhelming force, and fight far beyond ordinary Marines. Each Straw Hat now faced enemies powerful enough to push them beyond their limits completely. Before the battles fully began, Robin's tragic past slowly resurfaced through memories connected to Ohara, the island where she was born and raised among archaeologists researching the forbidden Void Century. Ever since childhood, Robin possessed the rare ability to read poneglyphs, ancient stones the world government feared because they contained truths about history the government desperately wanted erased forever. Robin's mother, Nico Olvia, had spent years searching for the true history hidden within the poneglyphs, alongside the scholars of Ohara. However, once the world government discovered the island's research into the Void Century, they labeled Ohara a threat to global stability and ordered its complete destruction through a devastating buster call attack involving multiple Marine warships and vice admirals. As Robin remembered the destruction of Ohara, she recalled desperately trying to survive while the island burned around her beneath explosions, collapsing buildings, and the deaths of nearly everyone she loved. Throughout the chaos, Jaguar D. Saul, a giant Marine vice admiral who befriended Robin during her childhood, sacrificed himself trying to help her escape the island before the buster call completely destroyed Ohara forever. Robin also remembered the final moments of Professor Clover and the scholars of Ohara as they desperately attempted preserving the island's research and knowledge, even while facing certain death beneath the world government's assault. Despite knowing they would likely die, the scholars refused abandoning the truth hidden within history, because they believed future generations deserved to know what truly happened during the Void Century. Among the most painful memories Robin carried was her goodbye with Saul, who encouraged her to continue living, even after losing everyone around her. Laughing despite his injuries and approaching death, Saul told Robin that no one in the world was ever truly born completely alone, and promised that someday she would eventually find people who would protect and accept her. After escaping Ohara as its sole survivor, Robin spent the next 20 years hunted constantly by the world government, while being betrayed repeatedly by criminals, organizations, and allies who feared the danger connected to her existence. Those years of loneliness and fear convinced Robin that allowing herself to care about others would only bring destruction upon them eventually. After surviving the destruction of Ohara as its sole survivor, Nico Robin spent the next 20 years constantly hunted by the world government while moving between criminal organizations, mercenary groups, and betrayals simply to stay alive. Ever since childhood, the government labeled her a dangerous criminal because of her ability to read poneglyphs, forcing Robin to live her entire life believing that trusting others would only bring ruin upon them eventually. Robin's painful memories continued resurfacing while she stood handcuffed at Enies Lobby, watching the Straw Hats risk everything to save her, despite openly declaring war against the world government itself. For most of her life, Robin believed no one would willingly protect her after learning about the danger connected to her existence, making the Straw Hats' determination almost impossible for her to fully understand emotionally. Meanwhile, Spondum became increasingly furious after Robin openly admitted she wanted to live and return to the Straw Hats. Obsessed with personal power and terrified of failure, Spondum ordered CP9 to eliminate the Straw Hats immediately before they could rescue Robin and interfere with his plans involving the ancient weapon Pluton. At that moment, the battles across Enies Lobby fully erupted as each Straw Hat confronted a powerful CP9 member capable of using Rokushiki techniques far beyond ordinary combat abilities. For the first time since entering the Grand Line, every member of the Straw Hat crew faced enemies powerful enough to push them completely beyond their physical and emotional limits. Zoro confronted Kaku, while Sanji faced Jabra in brutal battles against opponents whose speed and strength constantly overwhelmed ordinary fighters. Both CP9 agents possessed Devil Fruit transformations, alongside advanced Rokushiki abilities, forcing Zoro and Sanji to evolve rapidly during the fights if they hoped to survive and protect Robin successfully. Meanwhile, Nami faced Khalifa, whose Devil Fruit powers and intelligence made the battle especially dangerous. Despite initially struggling against Khalifa's abilities, Nami gradually adapted and used her growing mastery of the climate act to overcome an opponent far stronger than many enemies she fought previously. Chopper faced one of his most desperate moments against Kumadori after realizing normal transformations would not be enough to protect Robin and support the crew during the battle raging across Enies Lobby. Pushed into complete desperation, Chopper consumed multiple rumble balls and unleashed Monster Point for the first time, transforming into a terrifying giant creature completely beyond his control. Elsewhere throughout Enies Lobby, Frankie fought fiercely against Fukuro, while Usopp continued supporting the crew, despite still struggling emotionally after his earlier conflict with Luffy regarding the Going Merry. Even separated physically and emotionally at times, every Straw Hat continued fighting desperately for Robin because they understood how deeply she suffered throughout her lonely life before joining the crew. As battles erupted throughout the collapsing Judicial Island, beneath burning government flags and endless marine reinforcements, the rescue mission transformed into one of the most emotional and defining moments in the Straw Hats' entire journey, because every member of the crew fought not for treasure or glory, but simply to save a friend who finally believed she deserved to live. As battles erupted throughout Enies Lobby, beneath burning government flags and endless marine reinforcements, each Straw Hat faced enemies powerful enough to push them beyond their physical and emotional limits completely. For the first time in the journey, the crew was forced to evolve during battle itself because failure meant Robin would disappear into the world government's prisons forever. Zoro continued his brutal fight against Kaku, whose giraffe devil fruit transformation, combined with Rokushiki techniques, created an unpredictable and absurdly dangerous fighting style. Despite Kaku's strange appearance, his speed, destructive power, and swordsmanship constantly pressured Zoro while the battle tore apart large sections of Enies Lobby itself. Meanwhile, Sanji fought fiercely against Jabra, whose wolf devil fruit powers and ruthless combat style made him one of CP9's deadliest members. Throughout the battle, Jabra repeatedly manipulated Sanji emotionally through lies about Robin, while using brutal, close-range attacks designed to overwhelm Sanji before he could properly counterattack. As the fight intensified, Sanji unveiled Diable Jambe for the first time, after spinning his body at extreme speed until his leg ignited with intense heat and flames. Using the technique, Sanji's kicks became powerful enough to burn through Jabra's defenses and overwhelm one of CP9's strongest fighters in one of the arc's most memorable battles. Elsewhere across Enies Lobby, Nami struggled against Khalifa, whose devil fruit abilities covered Nami's body in slippery soap bubbles that weakened her physically and made movement increasingly difficult. Although initially overwhelmed, Nami gradually adapted during the fight and relied upon her intelligence, weather manipulation, and upgraded climatac techniques to survive against an enemy far stronger than herself physically. At the same time, Chopper faced one of the most desperate moments of his life while battling Kumadori deep within the collapsing judicial tower. Realizing his normal forms were not strong enough to save Robin and protect the crew, Chopper made the dangerous decision to consume multiple rumble balls, despite knowing the transformation could completely destroy his mind and body. Moments later, Chopper transformed into Monster Point for the very first time, becoming a terrifying giant beast completely beyond his control. The transformation overwhelmed Kumadori instantly, while destroying large portions of Enies Lobby itself. But Chopper temporarily lost his humanity beneath the monstrous power consuming him emotionally and physically. Meanwhile, Frankie fought fiercely against Fukuro, while Usopp continued supporting the crew, despite still carrying emotional pain from his earlier conflict with Luffy regarding the Going Merry. Even after temporarily separating from the crew emotionally, Usopp still risked everything during the rescue mission, because Robin's suffering reminded him how deeply the Straw Hats cared for one another, despite their flaws and conflicts. As chaos spread across Enies Lobby, beneath collapsing buildings, burning bridges, and endless marine reinforcements, every Straw Hat continued fighting desperately for Robin, because they understood that saving her meant far more than simply rescuing a crewmate. For Robin, Enies Lobby became the moment where she finally learned she was no longer alone in the world, after spending most of her life believing she never deserved to live at all. As the battles across Enies Lobby intensified beneath burning buildings and endless marine reinforcements, every Straw Hat continued pushing beyond their limits in order to rescue Robin before CP9 could escort her through the gates of justice forever. Across the collapsing Judicial Island, the rescue mission transformed into one of the most emotional and defining moments in the crew's entire journey, because every member fought not for treasure or fame, but simply to save a friend who finally wanted to live. Zoro's battle against Kaku grew increasingly destructive as both swordsmen tore through massive sections of Enies Lobby while exchanging devastating attacks at incredible speed. Despite Kaku's bizarre giraffe devil fruit transformation initially confusing him, Zoro gradually adapted and unleashed greater mastery of his swordsmanship while refusing to allow Robin's rescue to fail. During the climax of the fight, Zoro unveiled one of his strongest techniques, Ashura, creating the terrifying illusion of having 9 swords and 3 heads through overwhelming fighting spirit and power. The technique completely overwhelmed Kaku and became one of Zoro's most memorable moments in the series, as he defeated one of CP9's strongest assassins while proving how far his strength had evolved. Meanwhile, Sanji's brutal fight against Jabra continued across the collapsing tower, while flames erupted around his leg through Diable Jambe. Jabra constantly attempted manipulating Sanji emotionally through lies and psychological tricks, but Sanji eventually overwhelmed him with burning kicks powerful enough to defeat another of CP9's elite fighters in one of the arc's best battles. Elsewhere, Nami fully adapted to fighting with her upgraded climatac during her battle against Khalifa, despite initially being overwhelmed by Khalifa's devil fruit abilities. Using weather manipulation, mirages, and lightning-based attacks creatively, Nami defeated Khalifa while proving she could survive even against powerful government assassins far stronger than ordinary enemies. At the same time, Chopper's Monster Point transformation rampaged uncontrollably throughout Enies Lobby after he consumed multiple rumble balls in desperation to save Robin and protect the crew. Although the monstrous form defeated Kumadori instantly through overwhelming brute force, Chopper temporarily lost control of both his humanity and consciousness beneath the terrifying transformation, consuming him completely. Frankie continued fighting fiercely against Fukuro, while simultaneously trying to reach Robin emotionally after witnessing how deeply she still feared losing the people she cared about. Having suffered betrayal and loss himself throughout his life in Water 7, Frankie understood Robin's loneliness more clearly than most people around her. Meanwhile, Usopp continued supporting the crew from afar, while still struggling emotionally after his painful separation from the Straw Hats earlier during the conflict surrounding the Going Merry. Even so, Usopp repeatedly risked his life during the Enies Lobby assault because Robin's suffering reminded him how deeply the crew truly cared about one another despite their conflicts and insecurities. As the Straw Hats slowly defeated CP9, one battle at a time, while Enies Lobby collapsed around them beneath explosions and marine attacks, Robin watched in disbelief as every member of the crew fought desperately for her sake alone. For the first time since Ohara's destruction, Robin finally began understanding that she had truly found people willing to stand beside her, no matter how dangerous her existence might be. As the Straw Hats continued defeating CP9 members across Enies Lobby, one battle at a time, the chaos surrounding the Judicial Island intensified beneath collapsing towers, burning bridges, and endless waves of marine reinforcements. Even after the crew's victories against several CP9 agents, Robin still remained trapped, while Spandam desperately attempted forcing her toward the gates of justice before the rescue mission could succeed completely. Meanwhile, Luffy pushed deeper into Enies Lobby in pursuit of Robin and Rob Lucci, while confronting Blueno, one of CP9's strongest agents, and the first major obstacle standing directly in his path. Using Rokushiki techniques alongside the power of the Door fruit, Blueno initially overwhelmed Luffy with incredible speed and brutal attacks, powerful enough to remind Luffy how dangerous CP9 truly was compared to previous enemies. During the fight, Blueno repeatedly used Soru and his strange dimensional door abilities to evade Luffy's attacks effortlessly, while mocking the Straw Hats' chances of rescuing Robin from the world government. However, beneath his frustration and exhaustion, Luffy remembered how helpless he felt after earlier defeats against Aokiji and CP9, realizing that becoming stronger was the only way to protect his crew moving forward. At that moment, Luffy suddenly bit into his thumb and began pumping blood through his body at incredible speed, using the elasticity of his rubber body itself. Steam erupted from his skin, while his speed and power increased dramatically, shocking Blueno and everyone watching nearby, as Luffy revealed an entirely new transformation for the first time. Gear Second. With Gear Second activated, Luffy moved so quickly that even Blueno struggled tracking his movements, despite being a master of Rokushiki techniques. Every punch, kick, and movement carried explosive speed and overwhelming force, while steam poured continuously from Luffy's body as the strain of the technique pushed his physical limits far beyond normal combat. Luffy unleashed techniques such as Jet Pistol and Jet Stamp with devastating speed, overwhelming Blueno completely and proving that the Straw Hat captain had evolved tremendously since earlier encounters with CP9. Even Blueno himself realized that Luffy's speed now rivaled or even surpassed Soru, one of the world government's deadliest combat techniques. The battle quickly became one of the arc's most memorable moments, because Gear Second represented far more than a simple power-up for Luffy. The transformation symbolized his determination to become strong enough to protect his crew after repeatedly failing to save the people important to him during earlier conflicts throughout the Grand Line. Eventually, Luffy defeated Blue Eno decisively through the overwhelming speed and power of Gear Second, leaving Blue Eno shocked by how dramatically Luffy had evolved in such a short time. Although the transformation exhausted Luffy heavily afterward, he forced himself forward immediately because Robin's rescue remained far more important than the damage Gear Second inflicted upon his own body. Meanwhile, deeper within Enies Lobby, Robin continued being dragged toward the gates of justice by Spandam, while the remaining CP9 agents prepared for the final stages of the conflict. Across the collapsing island, the Straw Hats slowly pushed closer toward one of the greatest confrontations in the entire arc, as Luffy moved steadily toward his inevitable battle against Rob Lucci himself. After defeating Blue Eno with Gear Second, Luffy pushed deeper into Enies Lobby, while steam continued rising from his exhausted body, as the strain of the transformation slowly damaged him physically. Even so, Luffy refused to slow down, because Robin was still being dragged toward the gates of justice, while Rob Lucci and Spandam waded deeper within the collapsing government stronghold. Meanwhile, across Enies Lobby, the Straw Hats continued their desperate battles against the remaining CP9 members, while thousands of Marines flooded the island in response to the crew's assault. Despite the overwhelming odds surrounding them, every Straw Hat continued fighting relentlessly, because Robin's scream that she wanted to live gave the entire rescue mission a new emotional meaning. At the same time, Spandam's growing panic and arrogance caused him to accidentally trigger one of the most catastrophic events possible at Enies Lobby. While carrying the golden Den Den Mushi, Spandam unintentionally activated a buster call, summoning multiple Marine warships and vice admirals to completely destroy the judicial island beneath overwhelming military bombardment. The buster call represented one of the world government's most terrifying military powers, the same devastating attack previously used to erase O'Hara from existence during Robin's childhood. Hearing the announcement immediately terrified Robin, because she understood better than anyone the unimaginable destruction a buster call could unleash once the bombardment began. As Marine battleships slowly surrounded Enies Lobby across the ocean, chaos erupted throughout the island, while explosions, collapsing buildings, and panic spread everywhere beneath the approaching threat of total destruction. Even many Marines stationed at Enies Lobby began retreating in fear, after realizing the government itself was now willing to sacrifice the entire island simply to eliminate the Straw Hats and Robin. Meanwhile, Usopp finally confronted his own emotional struggles connected to the crew, after temporarily separating himself from the Straw Hats during the Water 7 conflict involving the Going Merry. Although he still hid behind the identity of Sogeking during much of the battle, Usopp repeatedly risked his life supporting the crew from afar, because he could not abandon Robin or the friends who remained deeply important to him. As the buster call drew closer, Frankie finally revealed the truth about the blueprints for Pluton, the ancient weapon sought by both the world government and CP9 for years. Rather than allowing such catastrophic power to fall into dangerous hands, Frankie burned the blueprints completely in front of Spandam and CP9, destroying one of the government's greatest ambitions forever. Spandam became completely enraged after losing the Pluton blueprints and responded by brutally attacking Robin while dragging her toward the gates of justice. Despite his cowardice and weakness, Spandam constantly abused his government authority while relying upon stronger subordinates, such as Rob Lucci, to enforce his power throughout Enies Lobby. Meanwhile, Luffy finally arrived at the Tower of Justice, where Robin remained trapped beside Spandam and Rob Lucci himself. Standing before the strongest CP9 agent, while the buster call closed in around Enies Lobby, Luffy prepared for one of the most important and brutal battles in the entire arc, as the fate of Robin and the Straw Hats hung entirely upon his victory. After finally reaching the Tower of Justice, Luffy confronted Rob Lucci directly, while Robin remained trapped beside Spandam as the buster call slowly closed in around Enies Lobby. Unlike the other CP9 members already defeated throughout the island, Lucci stood apart as the strongest assassin within the organization, possessing terrifying Rokushiki mastery alongside the power of the cat fruit model leopard. Meanwhile, Spondum continued dragging Robin violently toward the gates of justice, while ranting arrogantly about his authority within the world government and his obsession with power. Despite holding immense political influence through his government position, Spondum himself remained cowardly and weak, relying entirely upon Lucci and CP9 to enforce his will throughout Enies Lobby. As marine battleships surrounding Enies Lobby prepared for full bombardment, explosions and collapsing structures spread across the island beneath the growing chaos caused by the Buster Call. Even the Marines stationed throughout Enies Lobby struggled maintaining order, while thousands of soldiers attempted stopping the Straw Hats before they could escape with Robin alive. Luffy immediately attacked Lucci using Gear Second, moving with explosive speed while steam erupted continuously from his body. However, unlike Blueno, Lucci adapted quickly to Luffy's enhanced speed and countered many of his attacks through overwhelming physical strength, brutal Rokushiki techniques, and precise combat experience gained through years as the government's deadliest assassin. The clash between Luffy and Lucci quickly became one of the fiercest battles in the entire arc, as both fighters exchanged devastating blows powerful enough to shatter walls and collapse sections of the Tower of Justice itself. Despite Gear Second's incredible speed, Luffy gradually realized that defeating Lucci would require pushing himself even further beyond his limits, physically and emotionally. Meanwhile, Robin watched helplessly while the Straw Hats continued risking their lives for her sake alone, even as the Buster Call threatened destroying the entire island. After spending most of her life believing her existence only brought suffering and destruction to others, Robin struggled emotionally with the realization that the crew truly valued her life more than their own safety. Elsewhere across Enies Lobby, the remaining Straw Hats desperately fought through collapsing bridges, endless marine reinforcements, and heavy bombardment, while trying to regroup and escape the island before the Buster Call fully destroyed everything around them. Even after defeating CP9, the danger surrounding the crew continued escalating rapidly beneath the approaching warships and artillery fire. At one point during the battle, Luffy unveiled another terrifying transformation after inflating his bones by blowing air directly into them through his thumb. His body expanded massively, while his limbs became gigantic, allowing him to unleash overwhelming attacks powerful enough to rival Lucci's monstrous physical strength. The technique became known as Gear Third. Using Gear Third, Luffy unleashed gigantic attacks such as Gigant Pistol that devastated enormous portions of the Tower of Justice, while shocking both Lucci and the Marines witnessing the battle. Although the transformation granted incredible destructive power, it also carried severe physical drawbacks that weakened Luffy afterward, forcing him to balance survival against the desperate need to rescue Robin before Enies Lobby was destroyed completely. As the Buster Call surrounded Enies Lobby with massive marine warships and relentless bombardment, the entire judicial island began collapsing beneath explosions, artillery fire, and spreading destruction. Bridges shattered into the ocean, while government buildings crumbled around the Straw Hats, forcing the crew to continue fighting desperately through chaos as they searched for a path to escape with Robin alive. Meanwhile, Luffy's brutal battle against Rob Lucci intensified deep within the Tower of Justice as both fighters pushed their bodies beyond normal limits. Even after revealing Gear Second and Gear Third, Luffy continued struggling against Lucci's monstrous strength, overwhelming speed, and ruthless combat instincts as the strongest assassin within CP9. Lucci transformed fully into his leopard hybrid form through the power of the cat fruit, greatly increasing both his physical power and killing ability. Combining his devil fruit transformation with advanced Rokushiki techniques, Lucci unleashed devastating attacks capable of tearing through walls, floors, and entire sections of the collapsing tower while pressuring Luffy constantly. Despite the brutal damage accumulating across his body, Luffy refused to retreat, because Robin's life depended entirely upon defeating Lucci before the Buster Call destroyed Enies Lobby completely. Every punch Lucci landed exhausted Luffy further. Yet Luffy continued forcing himself forward through sheer determination and desperation to protect his crewmate. Meanwhile, the rest of the Straw Hats fought desperately across Enies Lobby, while Marine forces closed in from every direction beneath endless cannon fire. Zoro, Sanji, Nami, Chopper, Frankie, and Usopp struggled to regroup together while escorting Robin through collapsing bridges and burning pathways toward the shoreline before the bombardment consumed the island entirely. At the same time, Robin remained emotionally overwhelmed, watching the Straw Hats continue risking their lives for her, despite the impossible odds surrounding them. After spending most of her life believing she only brought suffering and destruction upon others, Robin slowly began accepting that the Straw Hats truly considered her family, rather than a burden to abandon when danger appeared. Elsewhere during the chaos, Frankie revealed more of his emotional connection to the Going Merry, after witnessing how far the Straw Hats were willing to go for one another. Having spent years around shipbuilding and understanding the bond sailors shared with their ships, Frankie quietly recognized that the Merry itself carried enormous emotional significance for the crew, far beyond being simply a vessel. As explosions consumed more of Enies Lobby beneath the growing Buster Call assault, vice admirals and thousands of Marines flooded the island, attempting to eliminate the Straw Hats before they escaped. Even after defeating CP9, the crew remained trapped within one of the world government's deadliest military operations, while the sea around Enies Lobby became completely surrounded by enemy battleships. Meanwhile, deep within the collapsing Tower of Justice, Luffy and Lucci continued exchanging devastating attacks, while the building itself slowly crumbled around them. The battle increasingly became less about technique and more about pure endurance, determination, and willpower, as both fighters pushed themselves closer toward physical collapse with every passing moment. As the Buster Call continued bombarding Enies Lobby from every direction, the Judicial Island collapsed further beneath endless cannon fire, explosions, and burning debris, while Marine forces desperately attempted surrounding the Straw Hats before they could escape. Across the island, bridges shattered into the ocean, while smoke and fire consumed enormous sections of the government stronghold once considered impossible to invade successfully. Meanwhile, Luffy's brutal battle against Rob Lucci intensified inside the collapsing Tower of Justice, as both fighters pushed their bodies beyond normal human limits. Even after activating Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd, Luffy continued struggling against Lucci's overwhelming strength, deadly Rokushiki techniques, and ruthless determination as CP9's strongest assassin. Lucci's leopard hybrid transformation granted him terrifying speed and physical power, while techniques such as Rokugan allowed him to unleash devastating internal shockwave attacks capable of severely injuring even Luffy's rubber body. Every exchange between them shattered walls, floors, and sections of the tower, while the Buster Call destroyed Enies Lobby around them simultaneously. Despite suffering enormous physical damage, Luffy refused to fall because Robin's life depended entirely upon defeating Lucci before the Straw Hats were overwhelmed by the world government's military forces. The battle gradually became less about technique and more about endurance, determination, and Luffy's refusal to abandon his crewmate, no matter how exhausted his body became. Meanwhile, the rest of the Straw Hats fought desperately across Enies Lobby, while escorting Robin through collapsing bridges, burning pathways, and endless waves of Marines. Zoro, Sanji, Frankie, Nami, Chopper, and Usopp pushed themselves beyond exhaustion while trying to survive the Buster Call and reunite with Luffy before the island was destroyed completely. At the same time, Robin remained emotionally overwhelmed, watching the Straw Hats continue risking their lives for her, despite facing impossible odds against the world government itself. After spending most of her life believing her existence only brought suffering and destruction to others, Robin slowly accepted that the Straw Hats genuinely considered her family rather than a burden to abandon when danger appeared. Elsewhere during the chaos, Usopp continued supporting the crew, despite still carrying emotional pain from his earlier separation from the Straw Hats during the Water 7 conflict involving the Going Merry. Even while hiding behind the identity of Sogeking at times, Usopp repeatedly risked his life because he could not abandon Robin or the crew that remained deeply important to him emotionally. As explosions consumed more of Enies Lobby beneath the relentless bombardment, Frankie began realizing the Going Merry itself might no longer survive much longer after enduring so much damage throughout the crew's journey. Having spent years around shipbuilding in Water 7, Frankie understood better than anyone how heavily damaged the Merry truly was, despite the emotional attachment the Straw Hats held toward their beloved ship. Meanwhile, deep inside the collapsing Tower of Justice, Lucci unleashed increasingly brutal attacks against Luffy while attempting to break his will completely before the rescue could succeed. However, even while battered, bleeding, and barely standing, Luffy continued forcing himself forward because losing Robin after hearing her scream that she wanted to live was something he absolutely refused to allow under any circumstance. As the Buster Call continued bombarding Enies Lobby from every direction, the Tower of Justice slowly collapsed around Luffy and Rob Lucci, while their brutal battle pushed both fighters toward physical exhaustion. Cannon fire shook the island constantly, while smoke, flames, and falling debris spread across the battlefield beneath the relentless assault of the marine warships surrounding Enies Lobby. Meanwhile, the rest of the Straw Hats desperately fought through collapsing bridges and endless marine reinforcements, while escorting Robin toward the shoreline in hopes of escaping the island before the Buster Call destroyed everything completely. Despite defeating CP9 members throughout Enies Lobby, the crew still faced overwhelming danger from vice admirals, warships, and thousands of government soldiers closing in around them. Inside the collapsing tower, Lucci unleashed increasingly devastating attacks against Luffy using both his leopard transformation and advanced Rokushiki techniques. Attacks such as Rokuogen inflicted enormous damage, even against Luffy's rubber body, gradually pushing him closer toward total physical collapse, while Lucci continued fighting with ruthless determination as CP9's strongest assassin. Despite his injuries and exhaustion, Luffy refused to fall because Robin's life depended entirely upon his victory. Every time Lucci knocked him down, Luffy forced himself back onto his feet through sheer willpower, while remembering Robin's desperate scream that she wanted to live and return to the crew. Meanwhile, Usopp finally dropped the Sogeking persona emotionally and began desperately screaming encouragement toward Luffy across the battlefield after realizing Luffy was reaching his physical limit against Lucci. Seeing his captain barely able to stand, Usopp reminded Luffy that everyone still believed in him and that Robin could not be saved unless he kept fighting, no matter how badly injured he became. Hearing Usopp's voice reignited Luffy's determination completely, allowing him to force his battered body forward once again, despite barely being able to move. Refusing to let Robin be taken away after everything the crew sacrificed for her, Luffy activated the last of his remaining strength and prepared one final assault against Lucci before his body gave out entirely. At that moment, Luffy unleashed one of the most iconic attacks in the arc, Jet Gatling, striking Lucci repeatedly with an overwhelming barrage of gear-second punches powerful enough to finally overpower the CP9 assassin's defenses. The relentless attack sent Lucci crashing through the collapsing tower, ending one of the fiercest and most emotional battles in the entire Enies Lobby arc. Although Luffy finally defeated Lucci, His body immediately collapsed afterward from exhaustion and accumulated injuries, while Enies Lobby itself continued falling apart beneath the Buster Call bombardment. Even with CP9 defeated, the Straw Hats still faced the seemingly impossible task of escaping an island completely surrounded by Marine warships before the government annihilated everyone remaining there. After Luffy finally defeated Rob Lucci through the overwhelming force of Jet Gatling, his exhausted body collapsed completely, while the Tower of Justice continued crumbling around him beneath the Buster Call bombardment. Although CP9 had finally been defeated, the Straw Hats still faced the seemingly impossible task of escaping Enies Lobby alive, while surrounded entirely by Marine warships and vice admirals. Meanwhile, the rest of the Straw Hats regrouped with Robin, after fighting desperately through collapsing bridges, burning buildings, and endless Marine reinforcements across the island. For the first time since her childhood tragedy at Ohara, Robin stood beside people who openly chose to protect her, even against the full power of the world government itself. As the bombardment intensified, Marine warships surrounding Enies Lobby prepared to annihilate the Straw Hats completely before they could escape the island. Cannon fire rained down endlessly across the sea, while the crew searched desperately for any possible route away from the collapsing Judicial Island before the Buster Call consumed everything around them. At that moment, something seemingly impossible suddenly appeared through the smoke and chaos surrounding Enies Lobby. Emerging across the ocean beneath the bombardment was the Going Merry itself, arriving beside the island despite previously being declared too damaged to continue sailing safely. The Straw Hats stood in disbelief as their beloved ship somehow came to rescue them during their darkest moment. Without hesitation, the crew carried the unconscious Luffy aboard the Merry, while explosions and cannon fire erupted all around them. Even surrounded by overwhelming Marine forces and government warships, the Straw Hats finally escaped Enies Lobby together after risking everything to rescue Robin from the world government's grasp. The Marines and Vice Admirals watched in shock as the Straw Hats successfully escaped the Buster Call, despite the impossible odds surrounding them. After openly declaring war against the world government, defeating CP9, destroying Enies Lobby, and rescuing Robin successfully, the Straw Hats emerged from the conflict as one of the most dangerous pirate crews in the world. Meanwhile, Robin quietly reflected upon everything the crew sacrificed for her sake throughout Enies Lobby, while finally allowing herself to believe Saul's words from childhood that someday she would truly find people willing to protect her and accept her existence completely. For Robin, the Straw Hats had become the family she spent her entire life searching for after Ohara's destruction. As the Going Merry carried the exhausted crew away from the burning ruins of Enies Lobby, beneath darkened skies and endless cannon fire, the Straw Hats believed they had finally survived the impossible together once again. However, beneath the emotional relief surrounding their escape, the crew slowly began realizing that the Merry itself had suffered devastating damage far beyond what any ship should have been able to endure any longer. After escaping the collapsing Tower of Justice, with Robin finally rescued, the Straw Hats raced desperately across the burning remains of Enies Lobby, while the Buster Call continued bombarding the island from every direction. Marine warships surrounded the sea completely, while cannon fire rained endlessly across the water, making escape seem almost impossible, even after defeating CP9 successfully. Meanwhile, the Going Merry carried the exhausted crew away from Enies Lobby, despite the devastating damage the ship had already suffered long before arriving at the island. Every Straw Hat stood shocked and emotional, seeing the Merry somehow appear through the chaos to rescue them during their darkest moment, despite previously being declared unable to sail any further safely. As the Marines continued pursuing them across the ocean beneath heavy bombardment, the Straw Hats worked together desperately to protect the Merry while carrying the unconscious Luffy aboard after his brutal battle against Rob Lucci. Even after defeating one of the world government's strongest assassins, Luffy's body remained completely exhausted from the overwhelming strain caused by Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd. Meanwhile, Robin quietly reflected upon everything that happened throughout Enies Lobby while standing beside the crew who risked their lives against the world government simply to bring her home. For the first time since Ohara's destruction during her childhood, Robin truly accepted that she had found people willing to protect her, not because of obligation or fear, but because they genuinely loved her as family. Elsewhere aboard the Mary, Usopp quietly struggled with guilt and unresolved emotions after his painful separation from the crew during the Water 7 conflict involving the ship itself. Although he continued supporting the crew throughout Enies Lobby, the emotional distance between himself and Luffy still lingered heavily beneath the relief surrounding Robin's rescue and their narrow escape from the Buster Call. As the Mary sailed farther away from the burning ruins of Enies Lobby, beneath darkened skies and distant explosions, Iceberg and Frankie began realizing the true extent of the ship's condition after enduring so much damage throughout the Grand Line journey. Despite somehow surviving long enough to rescue the crew once more, the Going Merry had already reached its absolute physical limit. Eventually, the crew reached temporary safety away from the marine bombardment, while finally allowing themselves to process everything they survived throughout the Enies Lobby assault. After openly declaring war against the world government, defeating CP9, rescuing Robin, and escaping the Buster Call itself, the Straw Hats had accomplished something considered impossible throughout the entire world. However, beneath the emotional relief surrounding their survival, a far more painful moment slowly approached for the crew. As the Mary drifted quietly across the ocean after carrying them safely away from Enies Lobby one final time, cracks and damage across the ship's structure continued spreading further, while the Straw Hats slowly realized their beloved ship could no longer continue sailing with them much longer. After escaping the destruction of Enies Lobby and surviving the Buster Call, the Straw Hats finally reached temporary safety aboard the Going Merry, while exhaustion and emotional relief spread throughout the crew. For the first time since Robin's capture, the crew could finally breathe, knowing they had succeeded in rescuing her from the world government, despite impossible odds surrounding the entire mission. Meanwhile, Robin quietly reflected upon everything that happened throughout Enies Lobby, while sitting beside the crew who openly declared war against the world government simply to save her life. After spending most of her life believing she only brought suffering and destruction upon others, Robin finally accepted that the Straw Hats genuinely considered her family rather than a burden destined to be abandoned eventually. Elsewhere aboard the Mary, Usopp continued struggling emotionally after his painful separation from the crew during the Water 7 conflict involving the ship itself. Although he fought beside the Straw Hats throughout Enies Lobby as Sogeking, the unresolved tension between himself and Luffy still lingered quietly beneath the emotional relief surrounding Robin's rescue and their escape from the Buster Call. As the crew rested after the brutal battle against CP9 and the Marines, Iceberg and Frankie examined the condition of the Going Merry more closely and realized the ship had suffered catastrophic damage far beyond repair. Despite somehow surviving long enough to rescue the crew one final time during the chaos at Enies Lobby, the Mary's structure had finally reached its absolute physical limit after enduring years of dangerous voyages across the Grand Line. When the Straw Hats learned the truth about the Mary's condition, the emotional weight surrounding the ship's fate slowly began settling over the entire crew. Ever since the early stages of their journey together, the Going Merry carried them across countless adventures, battles, storms, victories, and losses, while becoming far more than simply a ship to everyone aboard. Meanwhile, Frankie revealed his growing admiration for the Straw Hats after witnessing how far they were willing to go for one another throughout the Enies Lobby rescue mission. Having spent much of his life around shipbuilding and abandoned people in Water 7, Frankie deeply understood the emotional bonds connecting both the crew and the Going Merry itself. As night settled quietly across the ocean after the destruction of Enies Lobby, the crew remained gathered aboard the damaged Mary while reflecting upon everything they survived together. Although they had defeated CP9, rescued Robin, and escaped the world government's strongest assault, a far more painful goodbye slowly approached for the Straw Hats, as the reality surrounding the Mary's final journey became impossible to ignore any longer. After surviving the destruction of Enies Lobby and escaping the buster call aboard the Going Mary, the Straw Hats finally found temporary peace out at sea, while processing everything they endured throughout the rescue mission. Robin had been saved, CP9 defeated, and the world government openly challenged. Yet beneath the emotional relief surrounding their survival, the condition of the Mary continued weighing heavily upon the entire crew. Meanwhile, Luffy slowly recovered from the devastating physical strain caused by Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd after his brutal battle against Rob Lucci. Even while exhausted and barely able to move properly, Luffy remained relieved knowing Robin was finally safe and back beside the crew after nearly sacrificing herself alone once again. As the crew rested aboard the damaged Mary, Iceberg and Frankie confirmed the painful truth that the ship could no longer continue sailing safely, no matter how much they wished otherwise. The Going Mary had already surpassed its limits long ago, and only managed to survive the Enies Lobby escape through what almost felt like pure willpower alone. Hearing the truth devastated the Straw Hats emotionally, because the Mary had carried them through nearly every important stage of their journey since the East Blue. The ship was connected to countless memories, including their victories, hardships, adventures, friendships, and dreams as they traveled together across the seas pursuing the Grand Line. Eventually, the crew gathered together quietly aboard the Mary as flames were prepared to give the ship a proper Viking funeral at sea. One by one, the Straw Hats struggled holding back tears while staring at the damaged vessel that had protected and carried them through so much of their journey, despite suffering overwhelming damage long before Enies Lobby. As the Mary slowly burned upon the ocean beneath the night sky, the crew suddenly heard the ship itself apologizing softly for not being able to carry them farther. The emotional moment completely shattered the Straw Hats as they realized the Mary truly cared for them just as deeply as they cared for her throughout their journey together. Luffy and the others broke down crying openly, while thanking the Mary for everything she had done for them since the beginning of their adventure. Even after reaching her physical limit, the Mary still came to rescue the crew one final time during the chaos at Enies Lobby, making her farewell one of the saddest and most emotional moments in the entire story. As the flames slowly consumed the Going Mary, while the Straw Hats cried together beneath the darkened sky, the crew said goodbye, not simply to a ship, but to a precious companion who had traveled beside them through some of the most important moments of their lives. The end of the Mary's journey marked the end of an important chapter for the Straw Hats as they quietly drifted forward into an uncertain future together. After giving the Going Mary a tearful farewell at sea, the Straw Hats were left emotionally devastated while quietly watching the flames consume the ship that had carried them through so much of their journey together. For every member of the crew, the Mary had become far more than wood and sails alone. She was a companion who traveled beside them through victories, hardships, dreams, and some of the most important moments of their lives. Meanwhile, Robin continued processing everything that happened throughout Enies Lobby, while realizing how deeply the Straw Hats truly valued one another as family. After spending most of her life believing she was destined to remain alone after Ohara's destruction, Robin finally accepted that she no longer needed to run away from the people who cared about her. Elsewhere aboard the temporary marine ship they acquired after escaping Enies Lobby, Usopp remained separated emotionally from the crew, despite helping rescue Robin throughout the battle. The unresolved conflict between himself and Luffy over the Going Mary still lingered painfully after Water 7, especially now that the ship itself was truly gone forever. At the same time, Frankie quietly reflected upon the emotional bond connecting the Straw Hats after witnessing everything they endured together during the Enies Lobby assault. Having spent years building ships and understanding how sailors cared for their vessels, Frankie deeply understood why the Mary's loss affected the crew so heavily emotionally. Meanwhile, the world government reacted with outrage after learning that the Straw Hats successfully invaded Enies Lobby, defeated CP9, rescued Nico Robin, escaped the Buster Call, and openly declared war against the government itself. Across the world, the Straw Hats' new bounties increased dramatically as the crew became recognized as one of the most dangerous pirate groups sailing the seas. Despite the enormous dangers now surrounding them after Enies Lobby, the Straw Hats slowly began recovering emotionally while continuing forward together across the ocean. Even after suffering painful losses and nearly being destroyed by the world government itself, the crew remained united through the bonds they forged during the rescue of Robin. Eventually, Frankie decided to join the Straw Hats officially after becoming deeply moved by their loyalty toward one another and by everything they endured throughout Water 7 and Enies Lobby. Although initially reluctant, Frankie realized that sailing beside the Straw Hats offered him the freedom and family he secretly longed for after years spent isolated within Water 7. As the crew prepared to continue their journey deeper into the Grand Line, with Robin finally smiling beside them once again, one final emotional wound still remained unresolved among the Straw Hats themselves. Before they could truly move forward together after Enies Lobby, the painful distance between Usopp and the crew still needed to be healed completely. After the emotional farewell to the Going Merry, the Straw Hats slowly continued forward across the ocean, while carrying both the pain and growth they experienced throughout Water 7 and Enies Lobby. Although the crew survived impossible battles against CP9 and the world government itself, the loss of the Mary left a quiet emptiness among everyone aboard, as they struggled accepting that an important chapter of their journey had truly ended forever. Meanwhile, Usopp remained separated emotionally from the crew after the conflict surrounding the Mary caused him to leave the Straw Hats earlier during Water 7. Even though he fought beside them throughout Enies Lobby as Sogeking and helped save Robin, Usopp still felt ashamed and uncertain about whether he deserved to return after challenging Luffy and abandoning the crew during one of their most painful moments together. At the same time, Frankie officially prepared to join the Straw Hats after becoming deeply moved by the loyalty and emotional bonds connecting the crew throughout the Enies Lobby rescue mission. After spending much of his life isolated in Water 7, while carrying guilt connected to Tom's death and the sea train, Frankie finally found people whose dreams and freedom inspired him emotionally. Before departing Water 7 completely, Frankie constructed a brand new ship for the Straw Hats using the legendary atom wood, one of the strongest shipbuilding materials in the world. The ship represented a new beginning for the crew after the heartbreaking loss of the Going Merry, while symbolizing the next stage of their journey deeper into the Grand Line. When the new ship was finally revealed, the Straw Hats stood amazed before the Thousand Sunny, the vessel that would carry them into the future after the end of the Mary's journey. Designed with incredible craftsmanship, powerful weapon systems, and features suited for long voyages across dangerous seas, the Sunny immediately reflected Frankie's dream of building a ship capable of reaching the end of the world itself. Meanwhile, the emotional tensions surrounding Usopp quietly remained unresolved, even as the crew prepared to leave Water 7 aboard the Thousand Sunny. Although everyone deeply cared about him, Zoro reminded the crew that Usopp needed to sincerely apologize for abandoning the captain and challenging Luffy before he could simply return as though nothing happened. As the Straw Hats finally departed Water 7 aboard the Thousand Sunny, Usopp desperately chased after the crew while struggling emotionally with guilt, pride, and fear of rejection. After everything they survived together during Enies Lobby and the loss of the Mary, Usopp finally broke down completely and tearfully apologized to Luffy and the crew for leaving them behind. The moment immediately became one of the arc's most emotional resolutions, as Luffy and the others welcomed Usopp back without hesitation after hearing his sincere apology. After enduring separation, conflict, heartbreak, and war against the world government itself, the Straw Hats were finally reunited completely once again, as they sailed forward together aboard the Thousand Sunny toward the next stage of their adventure. After saying goodbye to the Going Merry and reuniting fully as a crew once again, the Straw Hats slowly prepared to move forward from the emotional scars left behind by Water 7 and Enies Lobby. Although they survived impossible battles against CP9 and the world government itself, the memories of Robin's suffering, the destruction of Enies Lobby, and the loss of the Merry remained deeply etched into everyone's hearts. Meanwhile, Frankie officially became part of the Straw Hat Pirates after finally accepting Luffy's invitation to join the crew as their shipwright. Having witnessed the lengths the Straw Hats were willing to go for one another throughout Enies Lobby, Frankie found himself deeply moved by the crew's loyalty, emotional bonds, and refusal to abandon their friends no matter the danger surrounding them. At the same time, the crew began adjusting to life aboard their new ship, the Thousand Sunny, built by Frankie using the legendary Atom Wood. Much larger and stronger than the Going Merry, the Sunny represented both a new beginning and the next stage of the Straw Hats' journey deeper into the Grand Line after the painful end of the Merry's voyage. Even while embracing their new ship, the emotional memory of the Going Merry still lingered heavily among the crew. The Merry's final rescue at Enies Lobby and emotional farewell remained one of the most heartbreaking moments in their adventure, because the ship had become far more than transportation alone after carrying them across so many important moments together. Meanwhile, Robin slowly began opening herself emotionally toward the rest of the crew after finally accepting that she truly belonged among the Straw Hats. After spending most of her life hunted, betrayed, and isolated following O'Hara's destruction, Robin now smiled more openly beside people who willingly challenged the entire world simply to protect her existence. Elsewhere aboard the Sunny, Usopp quietly settled back into the crew after finally apologizing sincerely to Luffy and reconciling with the Straw Hats. The emotional conflict surrounding the Going Merry and Usopp's temporary departure became one of the most painful but important moments in the crew's history, because it strengthened the bonds between them after surviving separation and heartbreak together. Across the world, news of the Enies Lobby incident spread rapidly, while governments, marines, and pirates alike reacted with shock after learning that the Straw Hats invaded one of the world government's strongest judicial islands, defeated CP9, rescued Nico Robin, survived the Buster Call, and escaped successfully. The crew's actions transformed them from rising pirates into one of the most dangerous groups sailing the seas. As the Thousand Sunny sailed forward beneath open skies and ocean winds, carrying the reunited Straw Hats toward their next adventure, the Enies Lobby arc ultimately became one of the defining turning points in the crew's journey, because it proved the lengths they were willing to go for one another. Through impossible battles, heartbreaking loss, and emotional reunions, the Straw Hats emerged stronger, closer, and more united than ever before. After the emotional farewell to the Going Merry and Usopp's tearful return to the crew, the Straw Hats finally stood reunited completely once again after everything they endured throughout Water 7 and Enies Lobby. The painful conflicts, separations, battles against CP9, and the devastating loss of the Merry had changed the crew deeply. But those hardships also strengthened the bonds connecting them more than ever before. Meanwhile, Frankie officially joined the Straw Hats as their shipwright after becoming inspired by the crew's loyalty toward one another and by Luffy's determination throughout the Enies Lobby rescue mission. After years spent isolated in Water 7 while carrying guilt connected to Tom's death and the sea train, Frankie finally found people whose dreams and freedom he genuinely wanted to support moving forward. At the same time, the Straw Hats prepared to leave Water 7 aboard the Thousand Sunny, the powerful new ship Frankie constructed using the legendary atom wood. Built to survive the dangerous seas of the Grand Line while carrying the dreams of the crew farther than ever before, the Sunny symbolized a new beginning after the emotional end of the Going Merry's journey. Across the world, news of the Enies Lobby incident spread rapidly after the Straw Hats openly declared war against the world government, defeated CP9, rescued Nico Robin, and escaped a buster call successfully. The crew's actions shocked both Marines and civilians alike because almost nobody believed a pirate crew could invade one of the government's strongest judicial islands and survive. As a result of the incident, the Straw Hats received dramatically increased bounties that reflected how dangerous the world government now considered them after Enies Lobby. Every member of the crew gained greater recognition across the seas, while Robin's rescue officially transformed the Straw Hats from rising pirates into direct enemies of the world government itself. Meanwhile, Robin quietly continued adjusting emotionally to life beside the crew, after finally allowing herself to believe she deserved happiness and companionship following years of loneliness after O'Hara's destruction. Surrounded by people willing to fight the entire world simply to protect her, Robin slowly began smiling more openly, while accepting the Straw Hats as the family she spent most of her life searching for. As the Thousand Sunny finally departed Water 7, carrying the fully reunited Straw Hat crew toward the next stage of their adventure, the emotional scars left behind by Enies Lobby remained deeply important to everyone aboard. The arc forever changed the crew through Robin's rescue, the loss of the Going Merry, Usopp's return, Frankie joining the crew, and the realization that the Straw Hats would willingly challenge even the world government itself in order to protect one another. The sea opened quietly before the Thousand Sunny, as Water 7 faded behind the crew, its rooftops, canals, shipyards, and memories growing smaller beneath the wide sky. No one needed to speak loudly for the meaning of that departure to settle around them, because the island had given them both heartbreak and a new beginning. Behind them remained the place where the Going Merry was laid to rest, and ahead of them waited the unknown path their new ship was ready to carry. Luffy stood with the same fearless spirit that had led them into Enies Lobby, but even he carried the weight of everything they had survived in a quieter way now. He had fought Lucci with everything in his body, not for glory or pride, but because Robin needed to be brought home. That simple truth stayed with the crew as the Sunny moved forward, reminding them what their captain's strength truly meant. Robin watched the sea from aboard the ship, no longer standing apart from the others as someone prepared to disappear when danger came too close. The words she had cried out at Enies Lobby still lived inside her, but now they no longer felt like a desperate wish hanging in the air. They had become part of her new life, carried by the voices, laughter, and steady presence of the people who had answered her without hesitation. Usopp remained with the crew after finally speaking from the deepest place in his heart, and the pain that had separated him from them began to soften into something they could heal together. His return did not erase what happened, but it allowed the bond to continue honestly, with all its pride, sorrow, apology, and forgiveness. On the same deck as everyone else again, he was no longer watching the crew sail away from him. Frankie settled into his place aboard the Thousand Sunny with a dream that now stretched far beyond Water 7. The ship he built was not only a masterpiece of wood, craft, and invention, but also a promise to carry the Straw Hats across seas even harsher than the ones they already knew. In giving them the Sunny, he had given himself a road forward too. Nami, Zoro, Sanji, Chopper, and the others each carried their own memories of Enies Lobby, where every member had fought in the way only they could. Their battles had not been separate victories, but pieces of one shared rescue that proved how far they were willing to go for a friend. The crew had entered that storm divided by fear and loss, yet they left it stronger, closer, and more certain of one another. As their new bounties spread across the world, the Straw Hats became impossible for the world government to ignore. But aboard the Sunny, those numbers were not what mattered most in the quiet hours after departure. What mattered was that Robin was still with them. Usopp had come home. Frankie had joined them, and the spirit of the Going Merry lived on in the journey they refused to abandon. The 1,000 Sunnies sailed forward beneath the open sky, carrying laughter, wounds, dreams, and memories into the next stretch of the Grand Line. Enies Lobby had changed the Straw Hats forever, but it had not broken them, because every painful goodbye had led them back to one another in the end. With the sea before them, and their hearts bound tighter than before, the crew continued toward the next adventure together. Thank you for spending this quiet time here. If this story brought you calm, you're welcome to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing which anime story you'd like to hear next. New peaceful stories are always on their way. Now let your breathing slow once more. Let the night settle gently around you and drift softly into rest. Good night and sweet dreams.